Gentlemen, the time is 9:14 and the board is now reconvened. And please write that down because Jane is not here. The board is reconvened in open session. We are ready to consider action on closed session items. Do we have any closed session items? Mrs. Tossan.
Yes, Madam President. I move that the Board of Trustees assign the consolidated Level 3 employee grievance appeal of Christina Carson to Richard Hightower, who will serve as the board's designated hearing officer under board policy DGBA local.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tossan and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mr. Rosenthal, do we have a motion?
Yes, ma'am. I move that the Board of Trustees assign the Level 3 DGBA employee grievance appeal of Lena Harris to Richard Hightower, who will serve as the board's designated hearing officer under board policy DGBA local.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rosenthal and a second by Mrs. Bailey. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Do we have any more motions from closed session, Mr. Burdine?
Yes, Madam President. I move that the Board of Trustees assign the Level 3 employee grievance appeal of Glenn Edens to Richard Hightower, who will serve as the board's designated hearing officer under board policy DGBA local.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Burdine and a second by Mrs. Bailey. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. The motion passes. Do we have any more items from closed session?
Yes, Madam President. I move to appoint Robert Fazackerly to the position of Procurement Director.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Bailey. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. The motion passes. And I believe that concludes our closed session items. We're now on to the consent agenda. Do we have any items from the consent agenda we'd like to remove? Very well, and we have the minutes, donations, approval of the Avid agreement, the affiliation agreement with Memorial Hermann Southwest, the PDOS appraiser list, program manager agent procurement method for the 2014 bond construction projects, the ratification of the emergency electrical work at Willow Ridge High School, the TASB update 100, and the proposed board policy revisions, the delegate and alternate for Houston Galveston Area Council, and the superintendent services performed.
Madam President, I move to approve consent agenda items 11A through J as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. Burdine for the consent agenda. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. The motion passes unanimously. The next item is item 12A, which is local adoption of board policy CT local regarding capital planning. Do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12A as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion?
I just wanted to see if you could help us recall where we were hung up last week and kind of what changed.
Okay, yes, sir. Let me go to that. So on section 1, first of all, we changed the purpose.
Right.
And the language specifically speaks about capital planning now. And then in section...
Well, excuse me, Mrs. Rincon.
Yes.
I believe what you have handed us here has changed that language,
Oh,
but
yes,
what
ma'am, I
everyone...
apologize. That's
So
right.
if you could be sure to clarify that, so everyone's on the same page.
So we actually have two versions. We have the one that's in the book that was provided to the board, and that is what we discussed in the workshop. The changes include at section 1, at page 1, under the section multi-year capital planning. We included the language about an important component of good financial stewardship. Also on page 1, identifying needs, we struck the language that was specific about capital assets, infrastructure, any changes in policy and community needs. That was a discussion about removing that language. And then under review, we clarified that the district would provide an updated capital plan for the board to review every 5 years, but that we would review the existing plan annually.
Okay. Good.
Then-
Okay, so I just want to clarify something here, because what we have a motion on is what's in our board book, and it's different than what's on this piece of paper. So we've revised in the board book. Is it possible, Mrs. Kaiser, to get the page from the board book up on the screen? I'm sorry about that, but I just want to be clear that everyone knows what we're voting on. The purpose on the paper we have in front of us has been revised, so we would need, I believe, to amend our motion if we are interested in considering, if you could scroll down just a little bit, other way, sorry, scroll up. There you go. So you'll notice that if I'm just comment here, you'll notice that at the top there, the title of this policy is Facilities Planning. And as we were kind of working on this week, I was speaking to Dr. Dupree, who said that we couldn't name it Capital Planning for some reason that is still unclear to me. But, so I suggested that since that naming it Capital Planning was not an option, that we should clarify in the purpose that the purpose of this policy was for the intention of capital planning. And so this rewritten purpose is meant to meet that need.
Okay. Did we make a motion yet?
We have a motion, yes, for the original version, which is the one on the screen.
So do we need to amend the motion to strike that? I need help. Strike that.
Strike the old purpose and,
Do we need to discuss this one before this one?
no, because if Mr. Rice chooses to amend his motion and Mr. Rosenthal agrees, we can just jump straight to this revised one.
Okay. So is everybody good with that?
Yes.
So could you say that into the
I
mic?
would like to revise my motion to reflect the policy contained in the handout this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Rice and Mr.
Second.
Rosenthal. All right, so now we're talking about not the one that's on the screen. We're talking about the one that's on the piece of paper in front of you, where the purpose is changed to, the purpose of this policy is to ensure the district develops and then regularly reviews and updates a capital plan The board expects the district to adequately plan school facilities and infrastructure in order to fulfill its responsibility to provide and support high-quality education.
So my only question is, you said you were going to go back and speak to TASB about whether we could call it capital planning, and clearly the answer was no, you cannot, and my only question is why not?
Because the coding is for the 1,030 districts that they service across the state of Texas. And so they are actually at 100% now with all the school districts, and they would have to go into their review with their legal team and their update team and decide if this change was necessary for all 1,000 plus districts, because this would change it for all school districts.
And
Why?
Because they have a master policy manual that they use. And so we could actually use just the standard policies that TASB provides us, and they have a master policy manual for all school districts. So what they allow us to change is the content, but they are still coded for all of their school districts. CT is facilities planning.
So we're not allowed to go outside of that coding system?
Not that
And
part.
create our own policy?
Correct.
Here locally in Fort Bend ISD?
Just the content of CT local, which is called facilities planning.
Okay, that was what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, and I did call them that next day we had a big, long chat about it.
Appreciate that.
Now they
There's actually
will-
several calls back and forth.
Yeah,
I'm
yes,
sure.
that's actually true. And they did say that they had already previously, the consultant previously mentioned it, and she will bring it up again when they actually meet at their next meeting with the legal team and have further discussion. But that could be, it could not change, or it could be months out, or,
Because it would be nice to be able to do what we need here in Fort Bend ISD without having the constraints of the coding system that may or may not work for us. So,
well, I think that the discussion that they would have would be whether or not they would still change it for the 1,000+ districts. Yeah.
perhaps they could change it for a few of us that need it and not for
Right, or what
everyone
if it
else in the
just
whole
was
wide world.
renamed, CT .1 or something like that, as
Exactly.
a son of a subcategory or something like that.
Well, and that's what I've asked Cynthia to continue to pursue, because I do believe we should, as a client of TASB, have the ability, if
Yes.
we have a policy we want to create that is not a standard policy, that they should be able to create, like Grail mentioned, a CTB or a CTC or something that's an extension, but we'll
Yes.
continue to have that dialogue.
Because clearly we are in an innovative district, and so we might want to create policy that they haven't even thought of.
Right, we
I
stretched
think
them
they
last.
agree.
That's
We
right.
stretched them last spring a little bit on that, too.
Did.
They finally found a letter of the alphabet that wasn't being used.
Yes.
And so, all right.
Thank you for doing that.
Do we have
for
any
us.
more discussion on this policy? CT local. Are we ready to vote? All right, then please vote. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item on our list is the review of future board meeting agenda items. Dr. Dupree.
As I followed up with Mrs. James from the last meeting, it's important that as I go over this, if you have other items or anything to add, please feel free to interject. My main goal is just to provide an overview of what's already on the calendar and what's coming up, but if you have other feedback, please feel free to let me know. As we've discussed on several occasions at the November meetings, either the workshop or the regular board meeting, you'll hear the Board Management Oversight Report on the Curriculum and Instruction Department by Dr. Hill. That'll be on the workshop meeting. We're also Dr. Whitbeck is also going to share the first look at House Bill 5 implementation, including CTE and academies at the November workshop. So that'll be another full evening. For action that week, we're going to look at the regular meeting in November, we'll have the annual CAFR financial audit report. We're going to try to look at the superintendent's evaluation instrument. and possibly appoint an internal auditor if a candidate emerges. And then we'll ask you to approve the 15-16 school year calendar in November. Then we go on into December, where we're going to do a comprehensive report on the annual National Clearinghouse update and the College Board, ACT, SAT, and all those things that we've been discussing, annual board training report, and then some improvement plans that we've been enacted for Willow Ridge and Briargate. That's according to TEA requirement. And then we're going to ask you to approve the House Bill 5 implementation CT and Academy plan in December. In November and December, we will also provide an update on our work on boundaries and feeder patterns, just so you'll be monthly hearing about where we are on those items. Then January, we'll ask you to adopt district-wide feeder patterns and boundaries. We'll begin budget briefings in January, and we'll also start introducing our discussion around the instructional technology plan in January or February, depending on how the schedule pans out. And also we'll fulfill our annual requirement to do the Texas Academic Performance Report.
All right, do we have any comments or questions on that? Thank you, Dr. Dupree. You've stunned us. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Tossan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.